Before the legend of the American West was written in gunpowder, the final argument was made of steel. It was 9 inches long, weighed over a pound, and it was not a tool that happened to be a weapon. It was a weapon that happened to be a tool. It was the Bowie knife, and for a brief, violent moment in history, it was the symbol of a nation being carved from a wilderness. A nation as ambitious, as unforgiving, and as dangerous as the blade itself. But the story of this blade wasn't forged in a blacksmith shop. It was born in the blood and mud of a backwoods brawl, and became the stuff of legend. The legend of the Bowie knife begins here, on a strip of wet sand in the middle of the Mississippi River, the Vidalia Sandbar. It was a place outside the law where disputes were settled with lead and steel. On this day, a formal duel was to take place between 2 local gentlemen. But below the surface of Southern honor, there was bad blood. Political rivalries and financial feuds simmered among the spectators. A man named Jim Bowie was there only to support a friend. He was already a known figure, a formidable land speculator, slave trader, and frontiersman with a reputation for a short temper. He wasn't looking for a fight. But on the sandbar, the fight comes looking for you. The duel was a farce. After 2 shots, both duelists missed. They shook hands and considered the matter settled. But for the spectators, it wasn't over. Insults were shouted, old grudges ignited, and in an instant, the sandbar erupted into a chaotic, bloody melee. Bowie was shot. He went down hard. His rival, a local sheriff named Norris Wright, saw his chance. Wright, who had been shot by Bowie years prior, charged forward and drove a sword cane straight into Bowie's chest. The blade struck bone, and Wright struggled to pull it free. It was a fatal mistake. Pinned, bleeding, with a sword in his ribs, Bowie was at his most dangerous. He held Wright with one hand, and with the other he drew the knife he carried at his belt. It was a massive thing, more of a butcher's tool than a gentleman's weapon. In one desperate, powerful motion, he gutted the sheriff. The man who had come to watch a duel had just ended a brawl with shocking, intimate brutality. He had been shot, stabbed, and beaten, but he was the one left standing. The news of the sandbar fight spread across the nation, but they weren't just talking about the man. They were talking about the knife. The story of the sandbar fight became a national sensation. In saloons and drawing rooms across the country, men spoke in awe of Jim Bowie's savage victory. And they all wanted one thing: a knife like his. But the original blade was a crude, hastily made tool. The legend needed a form, a proper smith to give it a soul. The story goes that Jim Bowie eventually sought out a master craftsman in Washington, Arkansas, a man named James Black. Black was a secretive, almost mythic figure in his own right, known for his unique methods for forging and tempering steel. Bowie gave him a wooden carving of the blade he envisioned, and Black set to work. What emerged from that forge was not just a knife, it was a perfectly engineered killing instrument. It was a short sword, balanced for the hand. But its genius was in 3 revolutionary features. First, the crossguard. Before the Bowie, most large knives offered no protection for the hand. This simple piece of brass was a revolution, allowing a man to parry and catch an opponent's blade without losing his fingers. It turned a simple knife fight into a sophisticated duel. Second, the blade's profile. It was thick, heavy, and weighted for powerful chopping blows like a hatchet. But its most terrifying innovation was the tip. The sharpened clip point, the false edge, gave the user a devastating advantage. It allowed for a brutal back cut, a flick of the wrist that could sever tendons and arteries. It made the knife lethal on the way in and on the way out. This was no longer a butcher knife. This was a weapon built with a new, terrifying logic. It was America's first and most iconic fighting knife. The Bowie knife spread like a fever. Blacksmiths from Sheffield, England, to the backwoods of Kentucky began producing their own versions. The name Bowie became a generic term for any large, terrifying fighting knife. It became the essential accessory for any man of ambition or ill repute, from the cotton brokers of New Orleans to the riverboat gamblers on the Mississippi. And with its popularity came a new kind of fear, a moral panic. Newspapers called it the Arkansas Toothpick and ran sensationalist stories of duels and murders. Editorials decried the reign of the blade. State legislatures took action. Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, one by one, they passed laws attempting to ban the carrying of Bowie knives. but it was useless. You couldn't ban an idea, and the idea was simple: power. In an age of unreliable single-shot firearms, the Bowie knife changed the calculus of violence. A pistol could miss, a pistol could misfire, but a 9-inch blade was a guarantee. It was the great equalizer. It gave one man the ability to dominate a room, to intimidate a rival without ever saying a word. Carrying a Bowie wasn't just a preparation for a fight, it was a declaration that you were willing to end one, permanently. And as the nation looked westward, towards a vast and lawless frontier, that declaration would become a vital tool for survival. The Bowie knife was born in the swamps and cities of the South, but it was destined for the frontier. As the idea of manifest destiny took hold, the belief that America was divinely ordained to expand from coast to coast, the blade became its unofficial sidearm. For the pioneers, the prospectors, the trappers, and the lawmen pushing into this vast, untamed wilderness, the Bowie was not a luxury. It was an essential piece of equipment. Out here, hundreds of miles from civilization, the knife's dual-purpose genius was fully realized. It was the camp tool that cleared brush and prepared food. It was the axe that felled saplings for a shelter. It was the skinning knife that processed game. Its heavy, rugged construction meant it could withstand brutal, daily abuse that would break a lesser blade. But when the sun went down and the nearest law was a month's ride away, the tool once again became the weapon. It was the last line of defense against predators, both animal and human. It was the dependable security that hung from a man's belt when his single-shot rifle was empty. The knife was a perfect reflection of the frontiersman himself, rugged, self-reliant, and capable of quiet utility, or sudden, lethal violence. It wasn't just a tool they carried, it was a part of who they were, an extension of the very spirit that drove a nation westward. The final chapter of Jim Bowie's life, and the final act of his knife's legend, would be written here. Inside the walls of a dusty Texas mission called the Alamo. By the time the siege began, Bowie was a colonel of the volunteer army, a respected leader. But he was no longer the fearsome brawler from the sandbar fight. Typhoid fever had broken him, leaving him bedridden, too weak to even stand. As Santa Anna's army stormed the walls on the final day, the battle raged outside his door. He was a caged lion, forced to listen to the sounds of his comrades being overwhelmed. His only companions were his loaded pistols and the familiar weight of his blade. When the soldiers finally burst into his room, they did not find a helpless invalid. The accounts told by the Mexican soldiers who survived that day were of a man possessed. Fighting from his back, he fired his pistols, then used his famous knife to defend his small corner of the world to the very last breath. He would not die quietly in a bed. He would die a fighter. The man was mortal. He fell. But in that final, hopeless act of defiance, he forged both himself and his blade into the bedrock of American myth. From the bloody mud of a riverbank to the hallowed halls of the Alamo, the Bowie knife carved its name into history. It began as the tool of a single, formidable man, but it became the symbol of an entire archetype, the American frontiersman. Rugged, individualistic, and dangerously self-reliant. Its design was so fundamental, so brutally effective, that its DNA can be seen in the fighting knives of American soldiers for the next 100 years. Its shadow stretches from the Texas Revolution to the beaches of World War II. In the end, the blade didn't just carve wood or defend its owner in a duel. It helped carve out a violent, formative, and unforgettable chapter of the American identity. It is more than a weapon. It is the story of a nation forged in steel.